And over to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much for the introductions, Larissa. And hello, everybody, also from Maria and myself. Today, we would like to walk you through the cleancore data dimension for SAP S/4HANA Cloud. In order to cover this relatively vast topic area, we brought you the following agenda for today's session. First, I'll hand over to Maria, who will introduce you to our new cleancore data white paper, your guide to start with clean core data. Then I will focus on two topic areas of clean data, data protection and data quality. For both deep dives, I brought you also customer stories to showcase to you which SAP tools and consulting solutions are there to support customers on their clean data journey. And as Larissa mentioned, towards the end of the session, we also have a dedicated section for your questions, but also feel free to post them in the chat during the presentation. And now, for the first part, I'll hand over to Maria.
Thank you, Daniel. Also, a very warm welcome from my side. Hello, everyone. My name is Maria Berg. I'm part of the Application Integration Center of Expertise at SAP. We have a very heavy focus on the topic of data, data quality, data volume management. We develop services and tools in this area. And I'm also part of the cleancore business office, leading the cleancore data principle and strategy for this topic. So before we move on to the white paper, since as Larissa mentioned, this is the second meeting we have or part of the series for the topic of cleancore data, I would like to do a short recap of what we discussed in the first session, or better to say about what is cleancore data in general, just in a nutshell, if you were not part of the first meeting. So Daniel, if you would go to the next slide. If we would, okay, we don't have that here, but let me just talk about this without a picture. I think you can picture it yourself pretty easily. So when we talk about cleancore data, we not only talk about how to measure it and about the KPIs and benchmarking. So, for example, the cleansing activities and archiving and deletion, things that we see on a daily basis. But this is, we rather have a holistic approach in this. So when we talk about cleancore data, we have a comprehensive foundation in mind. So it starts with data governance, in which we have a data governance body and we have roles and policies defined. We have data strategy, which is very interconnected with the data governance topic that we also would like you to follow as well. And then, of course, we have the topics of data quality. So how to assess data quality, how often do you need to do that? It's based on SAP best practices. We have the topic of SAP data volume efficiency. And of course, we have the data protection. And later on, Daniel would give you some real life customer examples on the topics of data quality and data protection as well. But going back to the recap, so based on this foundation, in the first part of this cleancore data series, we talked about what it means to have a stable cleancore data foundation. And also we had a dedicated session with an expert on the SAP Business Data Cloud as our flagship product, and the cleancore data foundation being very important for the successful implementation and leveraging of the SAP Business Data Cloud. So again, if you ask yourself, what would be the definition of cleancore data, I would tell you that it's data that is harmonized, that is semantically connected, that is managed, governed, and the other aspects that I have mentioned before. And all of this, just to kick off now this session today, all of this and more we discuss in the cleancore data white paper that we have recently published. In the white paper, we have tried again to go with this holistic approach and explain the motivation behind cleancore data, the drivers behind it, and also how to reach that state. So we really sat down together with the experts, and we looked at the different project phases, and we looked at our experiences from delivery and our communication with the customers. And we have combined all the pain points, all the best practices that we have to do with cleancore data, with all the 5 aspects, and listed down everything that needs to be done from discover to run in order to have a successful cleancore data journey. So in the white paper, you'll find 4 building blocks, let's say. Of course, it's an introduction of what it is, what is the foundation. Again, there you'll find out more about the topic. Then we have the part on the journey that I just described, and then we go deeper into the framework, which means that we have deep dives into every topic, again, based on SAP practices and our delivery experience. And then the 4th topic is about the cornerstones of the cleancore data architecture. So we explain the foundation of the SAP Business Data Cloud and SAP Master Data Governance, the 2 products that are necessary, again, if we talk about a successful cleancore data journey and a holistic approach. And if we would go to the next slide, then here again we would see who we thought of when we designed this document. And of course, we did think about the leadership. So specifically the first 2 chapters are designed for the leadership. So the essentials of the cleancore data topic are combined in these. And of course, the data engineers, for SAP, it's the SAP customer facing role, so enterprise architects, technical quality managers, and so on. And of course, to anyone who is interested in the data topic in general. And if we were to look at the key messages that we have tried to highlight in the cleancore data white paper is, you, of course, need a stable data governance model. So without data governance, everything else doesn't really matter. And you cannot be successful especially in the keep clean strategy. The data roles, as I already described, especially again, if we're talking about the move towards the data product economy, where you absolutely have to have the roles like data steward, data owner. We have to have data catalogs and so on. So you have to have the responsibilities defined and the feedback process in place. And as I already mentioned a couple of times, the recommended SAP best practices are highlighted in there, and how to prepare for that move towards the SAP Business Data Cloud. And today, as we already mentioned, we have a deep dive on the data quality and data protection. So before I finally hand over to Daniel for these topics, once again, we will post a link to the white paper and to the blog that we have designed. Feel free to check it out. We are very excited about your feedback. We're very open about this, and also I personally am very open to the conversation, and I'm hoping that you will have some questions in the end. So thank you, and Daniel, over to you.
Thank you very much, Maria. And just to sum it up, the recap that Maria did at the beginning, you will find all of those details also in the slides later if you would like to check it out. Now, let's move on to our first deep dive, which is the area of data protection. Data protection under cleancore is gaining more and more attention because not only it is an organizational requirement as some other topics in clean data, but it is also a regulatory requirement. Across the globe, there are multiple regulations, may those be international laws such as GDPR in Europe, or, for example, local regulations that are specific to a country. From a cleancore perspective, we define clean data as a comprehensive, accurate, and actively used data in a system that is in alignment not only with your business processes, but also at the same time with the intended purpose for which it was collected. And one key message here is that clean data can be considered only as a compliant data. If we take a look at the different requirements around data protection, then we kind of find a couple of similarities between regulations. One major requirement under data protection regulations is the deletion of data. So that means if data has fulfilled its useful life in your system and it has surpassed its residency and retention period defined by your business processes or regulations, it should be removed from your system, either into a compliant archive solution where it will be then deleted after the expiry of the retention period, or deleted directly if you are not doing the subsequent step of archiving. Besides deletion, one very prominent requirement is also information or information access. That means the technical possibility to provide the personal information that is stored in your system to the data subjects upon request in a human and machine readable format. So for example, a PDF containing all of the personal information of a given data subject if they're requesting it, or if it's requested as part, for example, of an audit. Besides these two major requirements, there are also a couple additional ones that are ensuring, for example, that the data in your system is kept up to date. So, for example, that text numbers in your system are valid, or address information is up to date, because it's key not only for your business processes, but at the same time, it also has regulatory implications. And besides that, it's also important to mention that besides monitoring certain business processes and also time periods such as residence and retention times in a system, it's also important to monitor for which purpose information was collected in your system to ensure that once that business purpose is not anymore given, so for example, you have fulfilled an order, therefore you don't need the details of a certain customer, that after the observation of the residence and retention period, the recorded purpose is also expired, so the data can be removed as such from the system. And finally, if you're processing any personal information in your system, a legal basis is required, from which one could be, for example, the explicit consent of the data subject given to you in order to process that information. That consent in combination with the purpose and with the residence and retention periods is governing for how long an information can be stored in your system, and of course, for which purpose it can be used. What's important to mention is now, before we move on to what technical capabilities are there in order to implement data protection from a clean data perspective, is that data protection in cleancore is not a one-time activity, just as cleancore as a whole. It is an ongoing effort to ensure that you're complying with the different aspects of cleancore, and also that you're keeping your data in your system clean and compliant over the course of the time. In the course of this presentation, you will see technical solutions that we as SAP offer in order to comply with data protection requirements. However, it's important to mention that we are only providing the tools and recommendations on how these tools could be used within organizations. However, it is, of course, a company's responsibility to also use these in alignment with regulations and to ensure compliance, because the technical capabilities alone are not enough to do so. And at the heart of everything that we are talking about in the data protection domain is, of course, the user and their personal information. Therefore, it's imperative to say that besides these technical capabilities, it's also very important to respect the respective user rights in your system. To give you an overview about how to approach data protection in cleancore, I brought you two views at this requirement. So one on the left-hand side is the view from SAP S/4HANA Cloud. And in this case, we will be focusing on the technical functionality of information lifecycle management that you might already be familiar with, because it's building on the classical SAP data archiving framework with additional functionalities to ensure that you can comply with data protection regulations. And on the right-hand side, I also brought you an outlook towards the SAP Business Technology Platform. And the reason for this is, if you already are familiar with cleancore, you will know that it is not prohibited to build extensions. You can build cleancore compliant extensions in the S4 stack, but you can also build side-by-side extensions on the Business Technology Platform, where you can not only build UIs, but also business logic, and you can also store their data. Therefore, it's important to take a holistic view on how to approach data protection. First, let me start with how to start with data protection as a whole. So how can you identify where personal information is stored in your S4 system? So first, of course, you can align with the business process owners and with the different data domains within your organization to identify where the personal information is used and might be also relevant for data protection. However, I would also like to direct your attention towards a tool-based consulting offering that is called the SAP Data Protection and Privacy Analysis Service. That is a tool set to help you identify where personal information is stored, for example, in your old on-prem system or in your new S4 Private Cloud Edition system. And it can not only identify where personal information is stored, but also it can provide you a roadmap on how to implement data protection in your system. Once you have identified where personal information is stored in S4, how can you take action for two of the most important requirements, so deletion and information access? Let me start with the deletion of personal data. So first and foremost, like I mentioned, there are classical archiving routines in old ECC stack systems, and some systems already have also ILM-enabled functionalities. From SAP, we usually position in this area the information lifecycle management, or short ILM tool, because it can help you to configure all of those components that I mentioned previously. So for example, residence and retention periods. At the same time, it can be also combined with the observation of, for example, a given business purpose in your system to ensure that when you are deleting or archiving information from your system, you are doing it in a compliant way that is not only providing you the necessary requirements from a data protection perspective, but also ensuring that there are no business interruptions from your archiving or deletion activities. ILM can also be used as a next step to archive and to delete data automatically. That means that it is not only a manual effort anymore, but can be actually leveraged as part of an automation in the system. And if we round up the data protection requirements on the S4 side, we can also take a look at how information access can be used. As part of the ILM framework, there is a functionality called the SAP Information Retrieval Framework that enables you to retrieve personal data from the system, may that be personal master data or even transactional data that has a certain reference to an individual in a human and machine readable format. And it can provide you with a comprehensive overview about where the personal information is stored in the system, and also in a way to represent that to the data subject upon request, or for example, as part of an audit. As mentioned, this is the main component of data protection for S/4HANA Cloud. However, if you are also building applications on the business technology platform, I'd also like to mention that in the business technology platform, you have very similar functionalities to that of the S4 stack. So that means first, here also we start with the identification of personal data. And because in the business technology platform, we don't have predefined data dictionary objects, but a full flexibility to store information, for example, in a SAP HANA Cloud instance, even in an S4 stack system, or in any other database. The identification of the personal data is, let's say, taking part more during the application development to help and identify where that information is stored, and then focusing on the data protection requirements in part of an automated tool set called the SAP Data Privacy Integration Kernel Service, which provides capabilities that are very similar to ILM. That means it can help you to set up residence and retention rules in your system, and also to delete personal information in accordance with those residence and retention rules. At the same time, it also has certain built-in automation capabilities to ensure that the data protection tasks that are in your organization can also be automated over the course of time so that you have reduced manual effort. If we take a look at the information access side, we find a very similar pattern. That means the key capabilities of DPI also provide you with a tool set to ensure that you can find the personal information in your system, and also at the same time identify it and provide it in a human machine readable format, may that be a PDF or a JSON file that you can then hand over to the data subject upon request. What's important to mention is because DPI is a service on the business technology platform. You can integrate it with, for example, applications that you build as part of a side-by-side extension. They also have integration APIs with standard SAP LOB solutions. So for example, Ariba or SuccessFactors, but you can also implement integrations with third-party applications so that you have one single application for data protection needs on the business technology platform. This as a comprehensive overview about what technical capabilities are there for data protection in S/4HANA Cloud and SAP BTP as part of cleandata. Now, to round things off, I also brought you a customer story in order to show you how we can support the different needs of customers as part of data protection and their clean data journey. And for this, I have brought you a customer scenario where I have worked together with a public institution that have built a new system to process inquiries. As part of this system, they have built a cloud native application on the business technology platform, and they have established a data storage in SAP S/4HANA Cloud, where they are storing a relatively high amount of data, more than 2 million entries annually. And these entries contain, of course, sensitive personal information. Therefore, they would like to comply with data protection regulations. From SAP, we have supported them with consulting expertise. That means we have helped the customer to identify the different data domains where personal data likely be stored, and then provided implementation support in the enablement of data privacy integration service, and also integrating the tool set into organizational activities at the customer to ensure that once the consulting delivery took place, the customer also can take ownership of the solution and use it according to their business requirements. A couple of specialties of this requirement was also to, of course, use as much standard solution as possible for custom applications on the business technology platform, and to incorporate customer-specific requirements, such as handling the relatively large transaction volumes annually as part of the archiving and deletion activities, and also to automate certain capabilities, such as identifying personal information that is expired and that should be deleted over the course of the time, and also automating the deletion end-to-end at the customer side. This customer story rounds up the part of data protection. And now I would like to also show you a second component of clean data, which is data quality. Data quality in the age of AI is, of course, a ever-present topic because the actual functionalities of business AI can be only as good as the database on which they are actually built. Data quality itself, as part of the cleancore journey, have a couple of implications as part of the transformation. So first and foremost, in most cases, as part of a cleancore journey, we find issues with data quality at customers during their upgrade or transition projects. This is usually the first case where incomplete information in the system is identified, or even inconsistencies as part of their upgrades or transitions. And therefore, it is usually, let's say, the first part where many customers start to actually take a deeper look at data quality and also its implications. However, it's also important to mention that if there are issues with data quality within an organization, it also has an effect on operational excellence. That means it can affect the day-to-day activities within an organization because, for example, business users cannot close certain transactions in their system, or even it can lead to inefficient reporting within analytics solutions if the base on which the, of course, AI intelligence tools are built is not perfect. At the same time, data quality itself is also having an implication from a compliance perspective. As part of the data protection section I mentioned, if there are incomplete information or outdated information within the system, these can be flagged, for example, as part of an audit as an issue with data from a compliance perspective. Therefore, it's imperative to also pay attention to ensuring that the data in the system is kept up to date and is used consistently. Also, IT organizations have, let's say, very challenging requirements from a data quality perspective, because if in the system there are invalid references or data sets which are preventing, for example, business users executing their activities. The IT teams are usually the ones who actually are there to support any issues, and they have an indirect contact with data quality, therefore. When we talk about data quality, we tend to mostly direct our attention to master data. However, what's important to mention, and what you will also see in the customer stories that I brought you for data quality, we also focus on reference and transactional data, because these are also affecting your organization and the organizational processes that are part of these. So how to get started with data quality? So first, to break up this section, I brought you two main areas. First, how to get data clean. As mentioned, there are organizations where data quality is already on top of their agenda, and they already have a very good overview about where the issues lie, because they might already be part of a transformation journey. However, if somebody would like to start with data quality as of now, there is a tool-based service offering much similar to the analysis service that I showed you earlier for the data protection part. For data quality, there is a tool-based service offering called the SAP Data Quality Improvement Service, which is a tool-based consulting offering that is building on top of years of experience to support our customers in identifying data quality issues, and at the same time also to provide recommendations on how these data quality issues can be mitigated or resolved within the system. If you are already taking on data quality topics within your organization, you might already be familiar with the SAP Master Data Governance as a tool that is available in the on-prem world, but also in the private and public cloud, that is there to support the creation and also the maintenance of master data over the course of the time. So that means it is there to ensure that the master data which is created in your organization is in line with your business processes, and also with a predefined set of rules governing the quality of master data. And it can support you in not only getting the data clean, but also keeping it over the course of the time clean. And speaking of the keeping data clean part, if you are already familiar with how to build extensions as part of cleancore journey, you already know that there are capabilities to build, for example, custom APIs or use public APIs released by SAP. You might be familiar with the SAP One Domain model that is there to unify the semantics on how to define the relationship between certain business objects within APIs. It is a model that is used by SAP and also is free for customers to use as part of defining API frameworks, and to ensure that if there are data sets exchanged between API endpoints, it is done in a unified way that is also reducing effort to actually integrate with new APIs. And to round things off, I would also like to mention, as part of keeping data clean, the SAP Master Data Integration Service that is used to unify the data distribution across your SAP and non-SAP applications. And it can act as a central hub for the distribution of master data, may that be customer, product, or vendor information, across your landscape. And at the same time, it can also be used in combination with SAP Master Data Governance to ensure that if, as part of this distribution, some master data is created, it is distributed in your landscape in a way that is complying with the different set of rules that you define in MDG and also with your business processes. These are the two main building blocks of data quality for clean data. Now, in order to also show to you how we can support our customer as part of the data quality aspect of clean data, I also brought you two customer stories. And I would like to start with the first one, that was the deduplication before an S4 transition for a customer, where we have supported them before they have integrated CVI, or customer vendor integration. The customer had issues because they had the difficulty to integrate CVI due to duplicate entries in their S4 system. And therefore, we have leveraged our data quality inspection service to first analyze the customer system, identify duplicate entries not only on the master data, but also on the transactional data level, and provide support to the customer on how to deduplicate these so that they can implement CVI as part of their S4 transition in their system. A couple of unique takeaways from this case is that it was done in a relatively short period of time and with a relatively high volume in the system. We also supported the customer in harmonizing their customer-specific tables as part of this deduplication efforts. And the second customer story that I brought you is a system consolidation journey where a customer had multiple regional S4 systems, and their main goal was to consolidate these multiple regional systems into one centralized system to establish an active golden record set. We have, again, leveraged our data quality inspection service, where we have used new capabilities of an AI-based tool within the service offering to identify which type of data should be part of the selective data transition as part of the system consolidation to create a new consolidated system for the customer. The uniqueness of this customer story is that we have provided support for the customer end-to-end as part of their SDT transition phase, selective data transition. And we also set up a dashboard to actually monitor the process over the duration of our support with the customer. This customer story rounds up the part for data quality. And now, before we move on to your questions, I also brought you a comprehensive overview about all of the different components that you have showed in that you have seen in the slides as part of consulting and tool offerings. So on this slide, you will find as a one-stop shop all of the different components, may that be from a data privacy perspective, data quality, or for example, even data volume optimization if you would like to reduce your data footprint on your S4 system. I would also like to draw your attention to a customer journey that we have in our service center called the Journey to Clean Data Powered by AI that acts as a compass for different service offerings that we have from SAP side to provide you not only on the product side that you saw in the slides before, but also in actual projects with SAP Consulting. Here you will find all of the services in detail that you have seen in today's session, and you also will find contact to the experts within these services who can also support you in questions in case we cannot answer them in this session. And that was the content part for today's presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. And now we will move on to your questions.
All right. Thanks, Maria. Thanks, Daniel, for this comprehensive presentation. And to all our participants, now is the moment to address the questions. You can do it via the chat or via Q&A tool, or you can raise your hand and we will try to unmute you. So in case you would like to ask the question. And with this, let me start with the first question. It arrived via chat. And the question is probably also for Daniel. Maybe you can look in the chat. The question is, can the user master data SU01 be deleted or better yet, anonymized so that no empty entries are displayed in documents? For example, orders or order created by user ID.
So, Daniel, for your information, I did give like a generic recommendation based on the SAP best practices again that the general recommendation is not to delete or anonymize the data, but rather either, for example, lock the user in the SU01 or use the ILM tool in the data masking option in the ILM tool. But again, feel free to elaborate on this.
Yes. Sorry, I just read the corresponding answers. So yes, Maria's recommendation is absolutely correct. We tend to discourage our users from manually deleting information because that can lead to inconsistencies in your system. The anonymization is definitely one approach. However, it's important to mention that anonymization is never fully compliant with data protection regulations. So therefore, let's say data protection compliant recommendation would be to use the ILM framework or archiving to remove personal data from your system.
All right, thank you for that. I hope this helps to answer this question. So probably if any follow-ups, also let us know in the chat. And let me move to the next question. By the way, there is a positive feedback. It was really clear and interesting. Thank you very much for the presentation. But the next question that I can see is, how do we calculate the cleancore score?
Mhm.
Why don't I take over this one? So the SAP offers two ways of measuring cleancore. So we generally differentiate between topics that we can calculate or measure based on information or data derived from customer systems. For these, we are defining, or we have already defined the first set of KPIs per principle, cleancore principle. So also in the case of data, we can also provide information, the relevant text that we have on this afterwards. In the case of data, we have two sets of KPIs defined, one on the data volume efficiency part and one on the data quality part. And for this, we are using the Rise with SAP methodology dashboard. So it's part of the Rise with SAP methodology framework. The other part of the score comes from the topics that are related to governance and operational maturity. So for this, we have an assessment, which will also become a tab in the Cloud LM infrastructure, where it is a set of questions, so a very comprehensive questionnaire. And then again, if we're talking about data, we have these 5 dimensions of cleancore data, from governance to protection. And for every topic, we have a set of questions that we have defined. And then the general idea is for the user to define the current and the target score or state where he or she would want to be, or in terms of the organization. With this, we can also track the progress. So this is all in the making, let's say. So we will soon publish the first set of KPIs for the data volume efficiency in the Rise with SAP methodology dashboard. The assessment is already there. At least it exists as a set of questions on a PowerPoint. Also, the application will be there soon from what I know. This will then combine into a score, a cleancore score per principle. And this, in the future, you will be able to see also in the Rise with SAP methodology dashboard.
All right, thank you for that. When it's published, would this be also somehow published on a broader scope, for example, so the participants can catch up very soon and know when it's published?
It will definitely be announced, yes.
All right, thank you for that. Let's move to the next question. Can you elaborate more on the possibilities of cleancore data tools, services, and principles outside of transformation projects?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I can take this one, and Maria, maybe you can add on top. So all of the tools that you have seen as part of this presentation, we take a look at them from, let's say, from a transformation journey perspective. However, it's important to say that if we take a look at, for example, data protection, it is an ongoing activity. So that means you can leverage ILM and, for example, DPI on business technology platform for ongoing activities to ensure that the clean data in your system remains clean, of course, and at the same time that you, for example, also keep your data footprint in check, that you are only storing information which really provides you also with business value by complying with regulations. And if you take a look at data quality, it's a very similar approach, right? So, for example, the usage of MDG and MDI is something that we also encourage our customers to do because it is not only there to ensure that you are complying with cleancore as part of your transformation journey, but it is also there so that it has a lasting effect, and at the same time that the data in your system is, of course, remaining relevant and useful. And it's also a very important topic if we take a look at not only AI, but also at data intelligence or, for example, reporting capabilities. So if you have a, let's say, specific need or question in this area, please also feel free to raise that question here or reach out to us via email, because then we can provide you with a more, let's say, focused recommendation on where to look for information.
Yeah, and just to add to that, once again, to go back to the RISE with SAP methodology dashboard, so it's the platform for the clean core and the information around all the principles. And this also, the idea is that the tool, the dashboard gives recommendations and points to the corresponding offerings. So of course we have in the premium engagement and the enterprise support and preferred success, we have comprehensive offerings which focus on the keep clean part in the case of data as well.
All right, thank you for that. Let's move to the next question. When converting vendors and customers to business partner while moving from ECC to S4, how does this impact the vendor number and existing PO and customer number and existing sales orders?
Yeah.
Yep, go ahead, Maria.
No. I was just going to say that that's very specific. So I'd have to dig out the information. But if you have the answer at hand.
I also wanted to say that I would have to check this first with my colleagues because I can't tell you that directly, unfortunately.
All right, then Mahesh, probably you can contact me or I can contact you. And so we will coordinate this follow-up probably via myself, and then we make sure that you receive answer on this as well. So there is one more question in Q&A tool. And the question, is the cleancore data white paper related to the S4 public private cloud systems only? I see no references to S4HANA on-prem systems.
So the document, apologies. Daniel, maybe you could start.
Yeah. So the document is acting as a guidance for, of course, your SAP S4HANA private cloud system, but it's not prohibiting you to already start your clean data journey on your on-prem system in S4. And this is also something that we encourage to customers who also either embrace on a transition journey or they would like to ensure that their system is cleancore compliant to already start with that today, wherever they are, which landscape they are, because this is actually an effort that we understand for a lot of customers is very challenging. And therefore, if you already start today, then of course it is a better scenario to start and upgrade later.
All right, thank you for that. One more question in the Q&A tool. How do you suggest to handle scenario where some organization who migrate all custom code and Z objects without proper analysis, creating a lift and shift scenario instead of simplification, as this can lead to upgrade delays, conflicts, and high maintenance costs?
Well, this is a question that rather goes in the direction of cleancore extensibility, but
Yes, so
yeah.
there is the application extension methodology defined by SAP that provides you with a level concept about how different extensions impact your clean core compliance. And without going into specifics, it's really difficult to provide here a recommendation. But I would like to say that, let's say, a lift and shift approach can affect, of course, your clean core compliance, not only from an implementation perspective or an extensibility perspective, also from a data perspective. Therefore, what we usually recommend as part of this transformation journeys is that you observe the application extension methodology as part of transferring custom code from your old world into a new world, so that you're building your extensions in a compliant way. And at the same time that you do the same for your data, right? So, for example, from a data protection perspective, that you analyze where personal information is stored and ensure that there is, for example, an archiving framework in place. And from a data quality perspective, that is also for the benefit of your organization, is that you identify the issues with data quality in your old system and try to resolve that as part of your transformation effort. So if you have there any specific questions also from, let's say, an application extension methodology perspective, please feel free to reach out to us, because we are coming from the data stream of clean data, but we can also direct your request towards our colleagues who can support from an extensibility perspective.
Right. And connected to this, I can probably also share a link to the dedicated session on extensibility that we have conducted in November with Lucas as a speaker. Let me share the link to this session with Anupam, and then, of course, feel free to connect with us if you have any follow-up questions. I can see one more question in the chat, and the question is, how granular can you get with the data quality framework and tools? I'm thinking of basic master data settings, for example, relevant to MRP.
So if I interpret the question in the right way, we're talking about clean core data, right? So which is not all the data. And here, of course, first of all, we would think about the main modules and the core processes. Yeah, again, maybe you could elaborate in the chat what exactly do you mean by granularity here?
My assumption would be from the abbreviation from MRP that it is an MM, so a material management specific question. So you can go relatively granular with the MDG framework. So that means you can go even to a table level to define the certain business rules for data quality. But again, if you have more specifics or let's say a given problem or question, please feel free to post that or to reach out, and then we can give you more infos.
All right, unless Yannick can raise the hand, so we can try to unmute him and let him speak, but of course it's up to you. If not, the offer of Daniel is valid. Just feel free to reach out to us if you feel that you need more information. All right. I don't see more questions in the chat or via Q&A tool. However, I give few more minutes for the participants. Maybe somebody is typing a question. Just for your information, the materials of this session will be uploaded on the Move to Cloud ERP webcast playlist on SAP community YouTube channel. I posted already a link in the chat for you, and it usually take some days until the session will be available, but definitely you can find it there, and also leverage this information for your further engagements or further education. All right, I can see some thanks in the chat, which is great. And we are actually almost at the end of our session. And with this, I suggest we close and wrap up now. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for our audience, also especially for those who were connected to us via all cleancore sessions. There will be one more session offered in January. So, and afterwards we can then wrap up the entire asset that we have around cleancore and public them as soon as possible. Also, thank you very much to Maria and Daniel for being with us, for providing all this information. Fantastic. Thank you very much also for answering and being so precise with the question. And of course, the follow-up that we just pick from the chat, we will do it, and hopefully it helps for those who are in the projects to bring more value and to move to cloud smoothly, I would say. This is the right word. All right. With this, again, thank you very much. I wish you great holiday season, and we will resume our webcast in January. With this, thank you very much and bye-bye.
Thank you
Thank you
all.
very much.